Evening. I'm Councillor Alan Law. I'm Chairman of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Commission. And before we start, I'd like to explain for the benefit of members of the public who may be watching that tonight's meeting will be held in a hybrid format. Following expiry of the emergency coronavirus regulations that permitted remote meetings, all of the Council's public meetings must now take place in person at a single specified geographical location with a physical presence at that location. However, the current COVID-safe capacity of the Council chamber means that not all attendees are able to attend in person, and so some members who are not on the Commission and some officers will be joining us remotely. The members of the Commission in the Council chamber this evening are Councillors Adrian Abbs, Peter Argyle, James Cole, Lee Dillon, Gareth Hurley, Tom Marino, Steve Masters, and Tony Vickers. Other members in attendance are Councillors Lynn Docherty, Alan McCrow, Eric Pattenden, and Howard Williston. Council officers present to advise and support the meeting are Nick Carter, the Chief Executive, and Paula Goodwin, the Service Lead from Human Resources. I'm also assisted by Sarah Clark, the Monitoring Officer. Gordon Oliver is the clerk for the meeting this evening, and the meeting is being live streamed by YouTube, and Christine Esler is the Zoom host. I would like to ask anyone wishing to speak to raise their Zoom hand, and all voting will be done by a show of actual hands later on. So if you could, even if you're in the chamber, please, by all means, wave at me physically, but please, for the benefit of this meeting, could you also raise your Zoom hand? Clark, do we have any apologies?
We've had apologies from Councillor Jeff Brooks and Councillor Claire Rolls, and Councillor Adrian Abbs and Peter Argyle are substituting.
Thank you very much. Members, are there any declarations of interest relating to the items on the agenda this evening? Councillor Masters.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to declare that I'm a member of the Unison branch here at West Berkshire Council.
Thank you. Any other? Okay. So we'll go straight on, therefore, to item 3, which is the call-in following the executive on the 15th of July. This is a special meeting of OSMC that has been called in to consider a request relating to Executive Decision EX 4011 of the 15th of July related to the Time Lord 2 project. So I'm first of all going to ask the Chief Executive, Nick Carter, to give a brief overview of the project and the strategy and the associated executive decision. I will then ask the 5 members who signed the call-in if they would present their reasons and their proposed alternative course of action. And following that, I'll invite executive members and officers to respond, and we'll take questions from other commission members at that particular point in time. And then we'll go on to the debate and the vote. I'd just like to remind members that the debate should and the questions should focus solely on matters raised in the call-in and should not introduce any new points. Okay. So OSMC is asked to review the executive's decision and to resolve either to confirm the executive decision, in which case it will be implemented with immediate effect, or to propose amendments and refer the matter back to executive for further consideration at the next meeting, as per, I believe, the paper section 3.4. What is important is OSMC is not permitted to overturn the executive decision. So with no more to do, no more to say, I'd like to ask Nick Carter, Chief Executive, to introduce the paper, please. Nick.
Is that the one? Sorry. Okay. Good evening, Chairman. Good evening, members. I don't think I'm on the. Oh, perhaps I am on the video now. I had a few problems trying to get online. If I could just explain the background to the paper. First thing I'd like to say is that Time Lord is not new. So Time Lord came into existence in 2010, following some work that was done with Vodafone. and we have moved into an environment where significant numbers of officers have been working at home for over a decade. The pandemic has brought, I think, new opportunities in terms of future working arrangements. And you've seen that, I think, across the whole economy, really. And the key points I think I just want to highlight are, firstly, a significant ramping up in how we're using digital technology, certainly far more so than we did under Time Lord 1. I think a strong sense amongst staff that, having been through the pandemic, they have seen a new way of working, which they want to continue with, the vast majority. And also, I think, wider opportunities in terms of improving effectiveness, and I'm happy to say a bit more about that probably later in the meeting, and also actually addressing some of the climate change issues that we as a council have. I think, Chairman, I'm not going to say a great deal more than that. I'm very happy to respond to the particular issues that I know are in the report. And I think probably I'll leave it there for now. We're at the point where we've spent a year planning this. We've done a lot of consultation within the council, 2 staff surveys, and I'm happy to say a bit more about that later. And we're now at a point where we are ready to implement the programme. And it might just be worth noting that I think all the other unitary authorities in Berkshire, in fact, many local authorities up and down the country, many private sector companies are all in a very similar position. So there's a sense amongst staff that they want to see this progressed, but I'll say a little bit more perhaps later in the meeting on that. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Chairman. The reasons for calling are outlined in the report. I won't go through them individually. I mean, all members have had ample time to read them. But what I wanted to do, Chairman, is just put the context really around why we've done a call in, actually. So again, it's a function that's available to us that is very rarely used. I mean, this might be the second or third call in that we've done as an opposition group, so we don't overutilise it. But when we went to the executive on the 15th of July, I tabled 12 questions, which the leader very gratefully allowed us to table all 12. But what we saw from Councillor Wollaston was actually acceptance of our questions and not having the answers. And so for us, we're not against the strategy in its biggest sense in terms of the digital tech. The staff can see the benefits of working from home. I think, Nick, you do need to evidence the effectiveness a bit more and the climate change, and we can maybe come on to that in the debate. But Chairman, if a portfolio holder is sat opposite you saying, yes, I agree, the report doesn't cover that. Yes, I agree, it needs to cover the resident and it doesn't mention their voice. Why would you then nod it through and accept it? Why wouldn't you take it back off, go and do some more work on it and bring it back to an executive in 4 weeks' time? And so actually our recommendation, hopefully tonight, that we'll be seeking support from, isn't to be prescriptive about what the executive should do or shouldn't do, but it's actually to take on board the feedback from that exec meeting where the portfolio holder agreed with us and actually embed that into the document, bring it back to the executive and let us see a fresh copy with that feedback taken on board. And that will be the recommendation we'll be seeking later on, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Can I just clarify? Because as I've read the papers, and I've just listened to what you've said, can I just clarify that I don't believe you're actually challenging the concept of this paper.
No. And as I said,
That's right.
you know, we're accepting, and we said that at the beginning, that it's not about COVID per se. You know, this is about just a general traction of change of how we work. We just, when it said there was, it would say that it helps residents. Well, actually, it doesn't mention residents, but it would say it would deliver better customer satisfaction, for example. And then nowhere is that evidence borne out for us as members to be able to take it as a fait accompli.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, very little about this. Isn't my portfolio, but my shadow portfolio. But in my shadow portfolio, I've come across residents, if you like, customers, in that dreadful phrase. I don't think we should treat ourselves as a sales body, but residents have said they find difficulty contacting officers over certain things, and that's a function of the digital world that we live in. And really, I think that the first 4 reasons in our list were the most important to me. And the first
Tony,
one,
may I just interrupt you? Could you just move slightly?
Sorry, I'm trying to get close to the mic
we're only
and
seeing
be
your
seen.
left ear.
There we are. Okay.
There you go. Thanks very much.
Right. I'm sure we're all grateful for the work that Nick has done in getting us to this stage, but I do feel that this is very much about going forward. And it doesn't seem right to me, and I think to my colleagues, that we are making this decision before a new chief executive comes in. It's basically his job to implement it. And as members, I think we need to defer to the very senior manager that we've chosen to allow him to. And I think that's one reason why a delay in the implementation stage, and to carry out particularly some sort of a survey of whether the residents that we serve are as happy with what we're doing, what we have done in the first stage of Time Lord, and what we're planning to do going forward. I do think also that we should, although I've never been a member of a union, I do believe in the idea of having organised labour, and whatever might be the current relations between Unison and the management here, I think we should have actually involved them perhaps more in this. But I think probably Steve, as a member, may have more to say on that. So I think it's those first 4 reasons. And just touching on number 3, whilst I can see reasons for giving some financial reimbursement for staff, I would not wish it to be seen as an incentive, because there may be some staff in whose best interest it is to stay in the office. It mentions safeguarding issues in our call-in, but also the health and well-being more generally of staff. And I think we should be more explicit about why we are offering an amount, and perhaps spend a bit more time in calculating what that amount should be and how it's paid. So I'll say no more at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So those are the 2 of the 5 members who called it in. So what I'd now like to do.
Chairman,
yes,
if I may, although my name was not on the letter, it was intended to be originally. I would appreciate being able to say a few words, if I may, at this stage.
You will be able to say a few words later on. But
Okay.
I'm going through strict protocol.
Understand.
Only the 5 names can speak at this point in time, when we only have 2 in the chamber, and the other 3 are not even online. So you will have you're more than ample opportunity.
If you don't mind me asking.
Right.
One was an apology, Chairman.
Sorry?
One of the signatories was an apology.
Yes. Can we, Nick, if you want to take that, or Hard, we haven't really gone in. We've just talked in generalities here so far. We're into the whole concept and the way forward. Time Lord 2 has been accepted. I think the questions are around the timing of when you implement it, and some queries on some of the implications of some of the policies. There's 16 of them here. I think you ought to pick up on some of those and respond, and then we'll open the floor up to questions and with people wishing to make points.
Thank you, Chairman. And I'll try and address all of the issues actually that have been set out in the paper. So just in response to Councillor Vickers' comments, Unison have been fully involved in the consultation around Time Lord 2, despite some of the issues we have. I made it clear that given we'd started that discussion with Unison, we would finish it. So they have been fully involved. They've met with me and so on. We did conduct a resident survey during the pandemic that did pick up issues around communication. So we have got a strong sense about what residents feel. And very strongly, there is a sort of focus around digital communication, not for everybody, but certainly for the vast majority in West Berkshire. So I do think, as I said earlier, we've done that consultation across the board, and I do think we've got a pretty good feel for where we need to be going. I have spoken personally to Nigel Lynn. I have met him, and he is very comfortable with this direction of travel. He is doing exactly the same. where he is, as are most authorities. So as far as he's concerned, he sees this as a natural evolution. As far as I think Nigel's concerned, his view would be, let's just get on with it. We don't need to delay. We're all doing this. It's the way forward. I take the points about the customer element, and that's my poor drafting, I have to say. So just to sort of hopefully clarify this, the work that we've done during the pandemic has not highlighted any particular issues around business continuity or any particular changes in the nature of the complaints that are coming forward. As I said at the start of the meeting, we have been working from home for a decade. And if you look at the current number of staff that work from home and the number that are in the office, moving from Time Lord 1 to Time Lord 2 actually doesn't shift things hugely. There is a slight movement towards staff wanting to work from home. And you could probably attribute that to having been through the pandemic and had to do it. Those who may have been a little less comfortable with the notion probably have thought, actually, this is, I can work like this. So I don't want members to feel that in moving to Time Lord 2, there is some sort of seismic shift in the way the council has worked. And I hope that gives you some reassurance that we are not talking about having to put a vast range of new policies and procedures in place, because we've been doing this, I think, for quite a while. When I put the points in around the customer element, what I was trying to get across, and probably didn't do that very well, is that there is a parallel piece of work that is being done at the moment, which members will see in due course, around how we rethink our engagement with customers, reflecting on what we have heard from residents and what we have experienced during the pandemic. So there's a whole question mark around, for example, what we do at the front desk. Do we need people to travel in to Newbury to have a meeting? Can we do that simply virtually? Do we want to move to a situation where it's all by appointment, et cetera, et cetera? So that piece of work is underway. So I don't want members to get the sense that somehow we don't know what the customer response to this will be, because we do. What I probably should have said is that we are looking at further opportunities as a separate piece of work. But in my view, that does not cut across the need to move forward with Time Lord 2. It will simply be another discussion that takes place about how we can work more effectively with our residents and our customers over the coming months. There's comments around confidentiality and data sharing. I want to say a couple of things on that. First of all, if staff cannot provide a confidential working space at home, they must be in the office. I also just want to say that if a member of staff wants to work in the office, they can. Nobody is being compelled to work from home. And by the same measure, if a manager feels they need to have a member of staff in the office, that is what will happen. So that flexibility, that managerial discretion, and the sense that there's no compulsion for people to work from home is there. But I am entirely comfortable that the whole issue around data management is secure. There's extensive training in place, some of which is online, of course. And also, during the pandemic, over the last 18 months or so, we measure monthly data breaches in the council, and there has not been any change in the pattern of data breaches during the last 18 months compared to the last, 7-8 years since we've been collecting that data. I note the comments about costs, and we took the view that £150 a year was a reasonable amount of money for staff to use to provide facilities at home. So staff will need to provide a desk, provide a chair. The council will provide the IT equipment, but staff will have to, at their own cost, provide and maintain that facility. The consultation from, for example, Unison have suggested it should be a lot more. We've taken the view that £150 is an appropriate sum to get set up. We have also, through the consultation, allowed people to take that as an upfront sum in the first year if they want. So in other words, if they need to get an office set up at home, haven't got the facility, then they can take the whole £150 upfront. They just simply then won't get the £12.50 allowance. We've reflected on all the comments during the consultation. We feel that that is an appropriate balance between, providing staff with the opportunity. We feel, that seems a reasonable amount of money without sort of draining the public purse. So that's sort of where we've got to with that. I take the point about if you live further away, you are going to save more on commuting costs. But the reality is that this is a sum to facilitate working from home. And we've got involved in all sorts of discussions about heating costs, additional heat, etc. What I have said to staff is that this is a contribution towards working from home. You are not being compelled to work from home. Anybody can come into the office all the time. And on that basis, we carried out a second survey. We've done it fairly recently, having done a first survey late last year. And people have come back pretty well with the same response they had in November, which is around 80% of our staff. And it's only 1,000 of the 1,500, because I think in some of the responses, people think all of our staff are time lorded. They're not. About 2/3 sit within the time lord program. About 80% are voting to work from home. And when I say work from home, I mean 3 days a week from home and 2 days a week in the office. Nobody is allowed to work from home all of the time. So some of the concerns around management support, all of those sorts of things, which I would entirely agree with, are held on to by that 3-2 split. And that 3-2 split, that hybrid as it's called, is very common across both the public and the private sector. It is becoming established as the norm. So I'm very comfortable with that. And it's quite pleasing because we were fairly quick out the blocks with this to see that people like Vodafone are following suit. They're not following us, but I think that we're simply taking cognizance of what's being seen more widely in terms of what's seen as good practice. I think there is some misunderstanding about core hours. We are not changing core hours. What we are saying is where both the employee and the manager feels core hours can be changed for the benefit of service delivery, then that will be enabled. But there is no wholesale change of core hours. If staff want to retain their hours, that is what will happen. This needs to be mutually agreed between both the manager and the employee. It seems to be a view that we are doing some sort of wholesale change. That is not true. And on new starters, just to put members' minds at risk, all new starters will be working in the office for the first 6 months. Again, I think that is essential. And I would expect managers to shape the support around those new starters. So if other managers need to be in the office to provide that support, as I said earlier on, staff will be told to come into the office if that is what is needed. Okay, that's been made fairly clear. I think there's a statement in the papers around this has all been done in haste. You won't be surprised to hear me say I don't agree. I think during the pandemic, it became very clear through staff surveys that actually this is what staff wanted to do. The opportunities of enhancing our digital infrastructure, of doing things far more effectively, saving money. And yes, I do think improving the service to the resident, there's a real ambition to do that. And you'll see in the papers that actually Time Lord 2 is aligned very closely with quite a lot of significant IT investment, which I think, and I'm no IT guru, as members will know, but from those colleagues who are, will actually pretty well transform some of the stuff that we're doing just in terms of saving time. We have some clunky processes at the council, which we've seen actually during the pandemic. Some of that IT investment that's in the paper, I think, will significantly change that. So you need to see Time Lord 2 alongside that IT investment. Training, we've done training online, mixture of online and face-to-face for many years. That will continue. And one of the things that we will push very heavily is to utilize Shaw House as a corporate office. So I very much see Shaw House as an underutilized asset that we have for things like training, for staff development. It has a very different feel to Market Street. And we are pushing forward with an arrangement whereby departments will be able to book Shaw House at no cost for what I would call more informal development work. And I think, that I think is a real opportunity. So you do need to see the new council arrangements as being Market Street plus Shaw House, because Shaw House is going to be part of that working arrangement. In terms of measuring effectiveness of services, I would argue that we have extensive performance management arrangements. Here we have resident surveys, we've got staff surveys. If members want to track what has happened over the last 5 years in terms of service delivery, impact on residents, etc., we can provide that data. We will continue to provide that data, but I would just reinforce the point that during the pandemic, we held up our services very well. And I can't see any reason why in a post-pandemic world with better enabled IT, we can't actually go beyond where we currently are. So if members are concerned about measuring the impact of Time Lord 2, I don't think you need to be too concerned. That data is there. I think the point around impact on the town centre is a fair one. I think we're in a period of change. I can't, as chief executive, really say to my staff, come into the office so that you can buy your sandwiches in Newbury town centre. I think we have to accept that actually the world of work is going to change. Quite what that impact will be on Newbury town centre, I'm not sure. But I want to take you back to the figures that I started with, which is a decade ago, lots of people stopped working in the office at West Berkshire Council. When we implement Time Lord 2, a few more will work from home, a few more. So if there was going to be a significant impact on town centre, it was probably more significant in 2010, 2011. But I do accept that actually we are going to see a shift there. And I think that's just part of the discussion that's already taking place in Newbury. It needs to take place about the future shape of our town centres. But we can't really hand on heart say, we need to all stay in the office so that some staff, and a lot of staff don't go out at lunchtime, go out and spend in the town centre. I don't think that is a tenable argument, though I do accept that there will be an impact. The points about no desks being available, we are using a booking system. And so we will not get to a point where desks won't be available. And the whole purpose of doing the second survey was to assess whether actually Market Street could accommodate all of those people working in the office and those that are spending their 2 days who are working from home in the office. And at the moment, it looks as if it can, but we still need to do a bit of work on that. Okay, so we're not quite out of that yet. All I would say is that, as you will see from the financial analysis, a significant saving comes from rationalising our office stock. One of the issues we found with Time Lord 1, I'll call it that, is that we haven't been able to maximise the occupancy of the buildings. Before Time Lord 1 in 2010, 40% of the desks were occupied at any one time in the council's corporate offices. When we moved to Time Lord 1, after pre-Time Lord, it went to 50%. So half of the office is unoccupied on average, each of our 3 offices. That makes no sense. So what we need to do is move to a situation where Market Street will be more fully utilised. So there will be more people in the. What we will be doing is simply saying there will be people sitting at the desks rather than being empty. And from a CO2 perspective, from a cost perspective, that has to make sense. But I do think that, accompanied with the opportunity of using Shaw House, won't make the building feel incredibly cramped, but it will be better utilised. And some of the investment that we're making is to ensure things like toilets, which are on the margins in terms of provision in this building, that we increase that to ensure that actually we don't have a problem there, because there will be more people we will fully utilise Market Street. It won't be half utilised, which is the situation we've had at the moment. There's a comment around the Unison response. We have Unison did send a response to executive members, and I'm happy to sort of take members through the key elements of that response if you wish. And we have responded to Unison on that. And all I would say is some of the issues that Unison have raised, we have responded to in a positive manner. But if it's helpful to take members through that, I'll happily do that, I think, later, Chairman. I think I've probably said enough for now, but hopefully that's given a sort of overview in terms of my response to the queries that have been raised.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. Before I actually open it up, may I ask Councillor Wollaston, do you wish to add anything to what Nick has said? I see you've got your hand up.
Thank you, Chairman. When I presented Nick's report to the executive, I frankly thought it was wholly uncontroversial. Virtually every private and public sector body is going through exactly the same process. And as such, I'll put my hands up, I was probably underprepared for some of the questions that came through from the Liberal Democrats in particular. But I think Nick has answered most of those completely. And I would still maintain my view that I wholly support this report. I think it's exactly the right way for the council. We're committed to providing our customers with the service and delivery that they require and need. And I cannot see any reason why this committee should not agree with the executive decision.
Thank you, Councillor Wollaston. I've got several hands up. I'll just go through the running order here. I've got Councillor Abbs, Councillor Doherty, Councillor Dillon, Councillor James Cole, Councillor Masters. So let's go, Councillor Abbs.
Thank you, Chairman. And thanks, Nick, for that additional information. If I may, I just ask for you for some clarification on a couple of things you said. You used the word slight difference, and you also mentioned CO2 and a bunch of other stuff, but the slight difference was in terms of the closure of the various facilities in town, closing 2 offices, maybe 3, if I've understood the report correctly. The third one is an option at this point. The fourth one is not for consideration. Is that correct?
The proposal in Newbury, assuming the figures work, is to close West Point and West Street House, keep Market Street, keep Turnham's Green in Calcott, and to utilise more actively Shaw House.
Okay. So you talk about slight difference. And you talked about the capacity of those buildings only being 50% at the moment. What does that actually mean in terms of number of staff, though?
I'll have to look in the report, and I'll happily do that. Whilst
I couldn't see a number in terms of this report, in terms of how many people it will end up affecting, but.
Well, in terms of how many people it will affect everybody who is in the Time Lord programme, because we intend to clearly move everybody out of West Street House and West Point, and even staff in this building will find they're probably moving floor because we want to redesign the floors. So I think everybody will be affected over the period. To answer your question, how many staff are going to be affected? There will probably be near on 1,000.
Would you concur that the report definitely suggests that the payback is 4.5 years, I believe? I think it mentions 4.5 years payback, and we've got 5 years, and there's £1 million to be saved in 5 years, £200,000 on these locations. So am I correct to conclude that within 6 months, we will start to get the savings from closure of these 2 locations?
I think the first thing to say is I think the executive, first of all, don't want to dispose of the buildings until after we've done that 6-month evaluation.
Okay.
We will clearly lose operating costs or some operating costs when the buildings are closed. So heating, some associated costs will go. And then I'm imagining we'll probably dispose of those buildings in due course, particularly given that area is almost certainly going to be part of a wider regeneration scheme. So as soon as we close the buildings, which won't be for 6 months after the completion of the implementation, then yes, we will make some of those savings. Where we're going to get to with business rates and things like that, I'd need to sort of have a look at. But
then I'd like members to look at the last 2 graphs in this report, which pretty much show savings straight away. So there's an inconsistency for me there, Chairman, in what I'm being shown in the report. But that's by the by. The slight difference is what I'm still trying to get back to, which is actually when you say slight difference in number of staff who are going to participate in Time Lord 2 and spend only 2/5 of their time in Newbury going forward. So slight, and the words you're using make it sound an insignificant amount of people, but I'd really like to get a number, please.
Okay, well, I'm happy to do that. So
Thank you.
There are about 1,000 people just over in the Time Lord programme.
Okay.
Currently under Time Lord, I'll call it Time Lord 1, there are 167 fixed members of staff. So those are staff with fixed desks. They will be in the office all the time. Currently, the statistics, not quite finished the second survey, show 108 wanting to be in the office. So there's a change there of about 50 to 60, moving from being in the office all the time to being in the office probably for 2 days a week. So it's not an overly significant.
So am I understanding you? There's just 50 to 60 people that will start working from home compared with what we currently have. That's it?
Yeah.
Okay. That is a small number. Yeah. This is good. The other thing you mentioned was CO2 and how it makes sense.
Excuse me, do you have many more? Because there are other people wishing to come in.
This is the last one.
Fine, okay, thank you.
Thank you. I wasn't going to open it back up to others. I could go on, but there's two I wanted to make.
No, I won't. Go on.
CO2 was mentioned as, but that statement is that it's the council CO2 that you're measuring, not West Berkshire's CO2, correct?
It's certainly, my understanding is it is CO2 that is derived from the office buildings, or a reduction in having less office buildings. And it's also from travel.
Okay, well, I'll come back to the travel bit, but you are referring to the council's portfolio and the council CO2, where our emergency declaration is actually for West Berkshire, so it has no effect on West Berkshire's CO2 emission from a building perspective. We'll come back to travel in a moment.
Well, I think that in the report, what it says is the council's carbon footprint is reduced by 6 to 7%. That surely has to be part of West Berkshire's.
Well, no, because one assumes you're going to dispose of the asset and somebody else is going to move in and start emitting CO2. So the net zero CO2 reduction is zero. It has no effect. Unless you knock the buildings down, as soon as they're occupied again, which hopefully you would do by disposing of the asset, it will emit CO2 again. It can't be, you can't have a win-win there. It can only be a win for council. The other part of that was you're talking about making Shaw House the corporate place to have meeting. It says in the report that senior members will ask to meet partners there and a few other things. So they'll come into this office. It's not walkable between here and Shaw House, or they can't go into their old offices. They don't exist. So now they're going to have to get back in the cars and go to Shaw House to have these meetings. So when we did the estimate of how much we're going to save, did we take things like that into account, that the total, the actual saving as opposed to an estimated saving?
I'm not close enough to the detail as to how that's been prepared, but I would challenge your sort of scenario. First of all, Shore House is extremely walkable, and I generally always walk to Shore House, and it's a very pleasant walk.
Okay, so then I'll change my argument to one of efficiency. Your time is efficiently used walking from here to Shore House and back, is it?
Depends. Takes what, 20 minutes. But I think the other point I'd make is I'm not anticipating staff coming to the office and then going to Shore House. I think what we will facilitate at Shore House is some working area. And I think what you'll find is people will come to Shore House, not necessarily go to the office. You will go for the day to Shore House or for half a day to do whatever you're going to do. So, I mean, this is all about working more smartly, isn't it? And instilling into our staff the importance of, working in a green way. So I don't think we're going to be talking about, people driving around Newbury. And that certainly isn't what I've been doing in the sort of 20 odd years that I've been here. So I take your point. It might take a little bit longer to walk to Shore House, but, I think that's what we should be encouraging.
No, and all I'm trying to point out to members is that there's a set of assumptions being made in the report rather than there being evidence-based fact. Because we haven't got the plan to change and make them adopt what you're describing. It's great if they do, and that's what we should be doing. But the chances are, well, it may happen or it may not happen. So I'm just concerned that throughout the report there's this over kind of assumption of this, and that will happen. And I'll come back later on if I get a chance, Chairman, but I did say only two questions. So CO2 and...
well, I think the main point is, as your leader already pointed out and agreed, you're all agreed in the direction that we're going and the concept.
Absolutely, it's more detail.
Yeah. So a number of the points you're making are kind of at the margin here of the thing, if I could be so bold to say so. I always welcome, by the way, a 20-minute break and a walk. It's somewhat the best thinking time as a senior executive you can have. It's a point maybe that I should make rather than Nick. I've got a number of people wishing to make comments or ask questions, and the next one is Councillor Doherty. Lynn.
Thank you, Councillor Law. I actually wished I'd come in before Councillor Abbs because I just wanted to make a sort of statement rather than a question. I just wanted to point out to everybody here that Nick has been our Chief Executive here in West Berkshire for the last 16 years. And actually the operational side of the running and management of his team has worked very well over that course of time. So while Councillor Abbs talks about assumptions, for me, there's a little bit of a problem with this paper in the fact that, one, you want to delay it till a new Chief Executive comes in the fact that I'm very confident and comfortable with our existing Chief Executive's direction of travel, and you've all just agreed to the direction of travel. So actually to start to get into the minutiae detail that Councillor Abbs is looking for, I think it is missing the point of this evening's call in, and perhaps Councillor Dillon will agree with me on that. This was about actually whether this decision should be taken now and if it was the right decision rather than going into the finite operational side of what we're doing here with these changes. So I was just going to say, as leader of West Berkshire Council, I'm fully supportive of this particular paper. But not only that, I'm fully supportive of it in the current timeline because I'm probably the one member that has spent the most time in the office over the last 18 months and has been talking directly to staff. And I understand their anxiety about uncertainty and the need to actually know what's coming up and coming forward. And I'm also the one person that has also been talking to many other local authorities up and down the country, leaders and chief executives, including Nigel himself, who will be coming in, about how they're progressing with this. So I just wanted to give my full support to this paper and say, you know, as far as operationally concerned, I think we're starting to really get in the business here as opposed to on it, and strategically where we as members should be sat. So I just wanted to say that, Councillor Law.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Councillor Dillon, you've got a chance to respond.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think what I would say, Lynn, in terms of assumptions is you've only been a member since 2015, so you wouldn't have known whether it was well run or not necessarily when Nick had it for the first 10 years.
I think I can actually see from the data and the reports that come through, Councillor Dillon, so thank you for that.
2007 as well.
Members, let's stick to the main point.
Yeah, I know, but this is part of the main point, though, I'm afraid, Councillor Law. It's about the assumptions. There are too many comments in the report without the evidence to back it up. We still haven't heard about the efficiency for residents. And I'm sorry, where residents aren't at the core of it, That's why we wouldn't take the decision now. We want members from look, members are a board of directors, right? We shouldn't be in the operational, but we should have absolute confidence that the structure being put forward will deliver the operational needs of the council. And what we're saying in the report is it makes the statement, but it doesn't ever back it up. Oh, and we want to go forward this way, but we will do it when we see the evidence that says it's okay to do it, not just blind faith. And the report that went to the executive was more based on blind faith than ever backing it up. There was no Sigma learning, there was no process mapping, there were no, it's going to improve efficiency by 0.2% in this department and by 12% in this department, which means actually we can draw the workforce down there and we can put more staff on a frontline service here. That's what strategic deployment around the workforce for me should be, and it should be backed up with core data that we, as in effect, as board of directors, can see and verify and then give our blessing for it to go ahead. So that's why, Councillor Doherty, it should be delayed, because you haven't, and maybe you've got the evidence, and Nick said, there is evidence there, but you haven't presented that evidence to members for us to have the confidence to sign it off. Just coming on to the chief executive's points, and I'm not going to go into too many of them in detail, but I think that this reporting of breaches hasn't increased isn't proof that it hasn't increased. And I know, but me saying that can be argued both ways, but we've seen it ourselves. Alan, Lynn, we've been in interviews for a chief executive and saw someone's husband walk past the background of a screen. There was no confidentiality in that room. And that person who walked past isn't duty bound to not go outside and say, you never guess who I just saw on a Zoom screen. So it is there, and the breaches are happening. The breach actually is happening. My children are in the room sometimes when we're in part 2. Now, if you want to, tell an 8-year-old off for reporting what he's heard in the part 2 meeting, then that's the type of area we're slipping into. So let's be realistic about it. There will be data breaches. So are we going to provide privacy screens for everybody? Are we going to provide that online learning about, could you make sure that your computer faces into the corner of your house, not out into your front room? All that practical stuff. And again, we raised these questions at the executive, and we were just told, yeah, we know we need to consider that. There will be a learning. Well, let's put it in the strategy and give us the confidence. That's all we're asking for.
Thank you, Councillor Diller. I have got Councillor James Cole.
Thank you, Chairman. Unless I've entirely misunderstood this, and setting aside for now some details, at high level, this appears to be a call-in with intent to delay something as if it's a project that the executive have approved before the new CEO has had the chance to get his feet under the desk. That's what it seems to be. Whereas actually, this is a development of an existing concept for a continually changing world and a series of policies that the executive have agreed. I see nothing in this call-in that makes me want to say no to the concept of policies. On the contrary, I approve of them. I think it makes great sense, for example, in the move towards carbon neutrality. I think Councillor Abbs is wrong there. As one of the features of entities moving out of buildings and moving on is that the next occupants will improve the buildings in terms of insulation and the like. The project plan comes next. The practical details that Councillor Dillon and Councillor Vickers, for example, mention should and will be covered in the project. And I see no sign of a project plan or a risk register, for example, in what's in front of us. The project comes next. We've been told that the new CEO approves of the concept and policies. Council leader would have massive egg on face if she proved wrong. And I can't see that happening. I'm quite happy to accept that statement. And anyway, the project work will be well underway when the CEO arrives to take control of it. So for me, that fits. Have I interpreted this correctly, Chairman? If I have, I'm entirely happy with this at high level, and I do not support the primary intent behind this call-in.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Masters.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'd just like to echo pretty much what Lee's said about, the lack of evidence. There is a lot of assumptions going on in the report that was presented to the executive on the 15th. With particular, focus on the lack of direct interaction with Unison, for example, and the potential effects of staff contracts. I don't think that's, while there's reassurances that they're not going to be changed too much, it's not been particularly well communicated and laid out any more than, yeah, we know that that's an issue and what have you. But one of the things that concerned me is that the executive voted this through on the 15th while there was still an open consultation with staff. Now, so I think that, we need reassurances that it's the potential for anything that came up in that consultation that continued for another couple of weeks after the vote will be taken on board, and not just vacuous reassurances. Yes, it needs to be in any further development of the plan. Those consultations need to be reiterated. And I think, and as I spoke, the union needs to be central to this, because not every member of staff is going to have the bandwidth or the inclination to get extremely caught up in the minutiae. So they do need some representation, and for that purpose. So I would ask that I know that the union have put proposals together formally to the council, and I won't want to second guess what Nick's going to say about that, but I think in good faith some of those proposals that the union have put forward formally need to be taken on board, and I would hope, as he said, that the response that the executive and himself have given is positive. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Masters. I've got Councillor Hurley, then Councillor Vickers. Gareth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In some ways, to echo Councillor Cole's words, that this is. Can you see me? Sorry. This is effectively the 21st century now, and this is the direction of travel in the public and private sectors. As Nick said, a lot of local authorities are moving this way. His successor supports of this. They're doing the same thing. All the big businesses in and around Newbury, West Berkshire are all doing this. So in some ways, this is a fait accompli. And written down here, I've got the question of staff retention and recruitment. So if we don't actually act, what are the consequences then? And that brings me back to the question of haste on this. If we were to drag our feet for a couple of months, there could be consequences. And I do like the phraseology that Councillor Cole's used, that this is the vision, this is the direction of travel. And some of the questions about security, some of the questions about performance, they are really down to policy level detail, and policies change over time because everyone needs to react to a changed environment in front of us. So in terms of performance, we monitor, we manage it. So that is what will happen between when this is implemented and we move forward and we react accordingly. So I think, everyone needs to be a bit bold and acknowledge this. I note in some ways the calling in, I've got somewhat confused by the number of points on there, because I think Nick's excellent summary answered majority of these questions, and now we were talking about the minutiae in this as well, not whether or not we do it, because everyone's violently in agreement with it. So I think I've got no objection to this at all in terms of Time Law 2, and it should be implemented. There's one point I would like to pick up, and this is the point about the impact on Newbury Town Centre. Having been at home for the majority of the last 18 months, like an awful lot of other people, what I've seen is a rejuvenation in other parts of West Berkshire. So take Thatcham, for example. Someone's working at home in Thatcham 3 days a week. They will still probably go out and buy their sandwich because that's part of the working day. And it's a break from your working environment. So you may see more investment in other parts of West Berkshire, which is a positive thing. It's a redistribution of the expenditure. And well, no. So I'm not going to repeat anything anyone else has said, to be honest, because people have commented on that. So that's all I've got to say. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No, thank you, Gareth. Councillor Vickers, Tony.
Thanks very much, Chairman. I'm really glad. First thing I'd like to say, I'm really glad we did call this in. I have been somewhat reassured by what Nick has told us. I just was uncomfortable at the way in which the questions were answered. I know Howard was new to the portfolio, and I can understand why an executive that's worked with a chief executive well for a number of years thinks that it's all tickety-boo and let's do it. But I think, we are a public service body. It was well worth having this call in so that we have a dedicated public meeting to look into some of the detail. And I still feel that there is no harm in delaying the formal decision for 2 or 3 months so that the new man, and I'm quite sure he's happy to go with it. I just think presentationally, we should let the new man coming in be the man that leads us into this slight change, as Nick called it. There are some risks, and I do look forward to the project plan. I mean, linked to the impact on the future of Newbury. What certainty do we have on the capital receipts we're going to get for those properties? I think there are a lot of risks around that area. I agree entirely with Councillor Hurley saying that what is perhaps bad news for Newbury is good news for Thatcham and good news for the villages. When we're looking into the local plan, which is another meeting coming up in a few months, want to see the new change in our working lives be actually made as positive as possible for some of our villages, and that Newbury will have a different role. But that's a different debate to be had anywhere else. Somewhere else, well, perhaps in this place, but at a different time. So I just say, colleagues, members, I have no regrets in calling this in. I haven't changed my views that, on balance, delaying this formal decision is a good idea. But let's put out a clear message that we are unanimously agreed that this is the direction of travel, and let us put our staff at rest, their minds at rest, that we broadly are all in one mind as to how the future of work for this council will be. But let's give the new man coming in at the top of the organisation a chance to formally do the job. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Tony. Yeah, I've listened to the debate. Got a few questions of my own, if you don't mind. I think there's a little bit of confusion here between what's a strategy, what's a direction of travel, and what's an actual project to be implemented. I can see some of the points that have been made. We don't have clear answers on this, but on a direction of travel and a strategy, you never quite have all the answers before you set out. But I'm concerned. Two things jumped out on me, and they've been answered by one of them has been answered by Nick, and that was my concern that I was aware that there was something going on in that different place, in that background, to look at the customer satisfaction, et cetera, if I could call them customers. And I know the leader, and we all know that. She said it so many times. It's the sort of thing we want to really focus on. And when we were doing the interviews for the new chief executive, that was quite a key parameter that we really wanted to try and enhance the residents' customers' experience, and even members' experience when we're dealing with the council and its officers. So it was a little bit unfortunate, I think, that wasn't in the original report big time. But I'm sure, I hope, I see nods. I think the chief executive has put her mind at ease on that. Well, the only question I have, Nick, when are we going to see a project plan? And who's the nominated, if you can say, I'm not sure if you can or not, who's the project manager going to be?
I'll answer that, Chairman. I'm quite happy to answer some of the other questions, but I'll refer to you on that. But in terms of your question, when I leave, Joseph Holmes is the sponsor. Okay, so that's what I've been doing. I don't, as chief executive, I don't do it all, but I have chaired the meetings, as I've it was something I decided to do before I left. But we now have a dedicated project manager as well. I won't give the name, it's a public meeting, but she works in HR. And there is an outline project plan. Okay. But as you said, Chairman, this, and as others have said this evening, what I have presented to you is the plan, the strategy. We now effectively will move into implementation, and you will have all of that. And if members want to see that, don't usually get involved in that level of detail, but if members want to get involved in that, the risk registers, the highlight reports, et cetera, that will all be there. But my focus has been on part one, which is what's the strategy for taking it forward. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does actually. I think it's very key because behind the call in, I think, was concerns about risks. And I think the first thing to do with a project, as you just mentioned, is a risk register. So in some respects, from where I'm sitting, the call-in's a little bit almost premature. I'd rather have seen the project plan and then you raise your questions. But I can understand where it comes from, where the politics are. Okay. Well, I think you've called it in. You've got to wait at least 6 months. Nick, you said you wanted to make a couple of comments, and then I think we'll close it off after your response.
I just wanted to come back on some of the comments that have been made. So I think in responding to Councillor Abbs, hopefully members have seen that actually the shift in terms of how staff will be working is probably not as profound as perhaps some members may have thought. So this sort of sense that there's a sort of seismic shift and there's going to be risks to our customer response, et cetera, I don't think are true. And I would just go back to the experience during the pandemic. Nothing sort of slipped. So there are changes here. There are changes around, we're going to utilize the buildings more effectively. We are going to significantly ramp up our ICT. But actually, in terms of homework, the balance between home working and office working, that is probably less significant than perhaps some felt when they walked into the chamber this evening. Just want to give some reassurance about the training and the breaches point. Absolutely, the training is there. We have our health and safety team who have been incredibly active during this first year in making sure that what's happening in the home environment is what it should be. And I think we'll be more rigorous about that than, to be perfectly honest, we were in Time Lord 1. What we're also introducing, because actually what came out of the consultation was a whole issue around staff safety. So we are giving every member of staff on the council mobile phone access to the Lone Worker app. Previously, that was just to high-risk staff. I think the other thing just to say, when you talk about people being seen in the background, you need to remember that, of course, a lot of people have been in lockdown. So you know, there were households over the last 18 months, all of whom have been at home in a very artificial environment. We are getting back, but there are no lockdowns now. So I think increasingly you will find staff working in an environment where the children aren't at home because they're at school, etc. I'm not saying it's going to be perfect. Partners. Still, because everyone's working 2 days. Potentially, may not be the same 2 days. Who knows? But I do think lockdown created a particular issue. In relation to Unison, again, I'll make the point, there's been full consultation with Unison over Time Lord 2. I made that sort of commitment. The second survey that's been done is not a consultation. So the survey that's just finished, and I've made reference to this evening in terms of numbers, is basically a question that says, what is the lifestyle, work style, not lifestyle, what is the work style you want to choose? And are there any particular adaptations we need to consider? Because staff who have particular needs will be given their own desk. So it's you know, we made it clear to everybody that did the consultation, but what we would do is, once we had taken cognizance of the consultation, we did some reshaping of the work styles, we go out again to staff and say, okay, made a few little amendments, adjustments here, choose your work style now. And what's come back is pretty well exactly what came back in November, but it wasn't a consultation. Just want to make that clear. We have responded to Unison's comments. What were the main key issues? The biggest issue, both with Unison and with staff, was the issue around car parking. It was nothing to do with the work styles. It was the issue about holding on to a long-held right to car parking. And in terms of, if you like, the contractual position, we took the view that actually we needed to let staff retain that, because I think we would have been in a difficult position had we chosen to sort of start afresh. Where we haven't agreed with Unison, and we have taken external advice, is that the work styles themselves are not contractual. They think they are. We have that advice. Our officers here who can talk if you want more detail about that. But we've discussed that, and we've informed Unison of our views. Unison felt there should be a bigger allowance. We took the view we didn't think that could be justified. Unison, interestingly, made the proposal for 6 months to review after 6 months after implementation. We accepted that. We thought that was a good idea. So we have taken on board some of Unison's comments. Others we haven't, but we made it clear to Unison what we've chosen to do and what we've chosen not to do. And I have explained all of that in some detail to staff, and all of that is on the intranet. So, but I just, despite the issues we do have with Unison at the moment, just wanted to reinforce the point when it came to Time Lord 2, I said we've started, so we'll finish in the way that we would usually operate. And then just finally, Chairman, just something that might be of interest, and it's not in the report, but I think certainly for me as your departing Chief Executive is probably one of the most positive things that I have seen over the last week is that we've just got the highlights from our employee attitude survey. So the employee attitude survey has a big response from staff. I started it in 2007. We did the last in 2018, and we have seen a significant increase in what we term employee engagement. So this is really the satisfaction of employees working at the council. And I have to say, Paul and I had this conversation this morning, having gone through the pandemic and all of the challenges of the pandemic, I was expecting a pretty negative result. Actually, it has gone up quite significantly to a level that actually I think a lot of organisations, I think we're fair to say, would be quite envious of. So I won't have the time to investigate all of that, but I hope it is a reflection to members here this evening that your staff are, where we are now, are in a very positive mind around where the organisation is. I'll leave it there, Chairman.
Thank you, Nick. Councillor Abbs, I think the debate's practically finished, but you did have your hand up. As long as it's not a long one, go ahead.
Do you want to set a timer for me or something?
Yeah, I can do. Yeah, I'm the chairman. I can stop you anytime. Go
Chairman,
ahead.
We have a few options in front of us this evening, and just saying we want to delay it is kind of just it's not really what I would want to do. I thought we were meant to suggest alterations to the report as we go forward, and that's really where I would have liked to have concentrated on, in terms of if we are going to send this out from here back to the executive, that we say what we would like to see changed.
Well, you have in fact, it's section 3.4, 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's in the paper.
But we're talking about what we've been debating this evening. So
but
I would have been proposing that we add numbers, which is one of the main things that's come out this evening. In terms of efficiency is mentioned 10 times, but there's no number. Effectiveness is mentioned 12 times in this report. There's no number. CO2 it does have a number against saving, but as I was just debating with Nick, there is some doubt about it. So the numbers will help the report turn into a plan and then into a delivery. So I don't think that's asking so much. And if nothing else, Chairman, I'd like some of the errors in the report to be corrected, like labels on graphs that are not there. Page, I think the 2020-2021 fiscal year, when clearly it's 2021-22 fiscal year. Just somebody reread the report for accuracy and labels and the obvious stuff before it becomes a final public document. So that's really all it was doing.
Yeah, I think it is already a public document, so it's
I corrected what a public document is what I'm asking for.
Yes, but I take your points, but I'm looking for the big picture, the essence of the whole thing. The essence here is to delay a concept as opposed to delay a project. I'm
sorry, it's to delay a vision because we haven't seen the evidence to support it, although we feel that it's the right direction of travel.
Yeah.
But we haven't seen the evidence. The executive may have done, but the executive have not answered the questions that we had about it, particularly around efficiency. And Nick said he's happy to go into that tonight, and he hasn't once said how he's measured efficiency going forward. Actually, at one point, Nick says, because of computers, basically, I suspect it will happen. And he said, I feel we've got enough PM performance there. and so we will become more effective. That's not a statement of becoming an efficient organisation, is it? Without evidence.
Well, this is where I think we're getting confused between a strategy, a direction, and an implementation plan, and we haven't actually yet seen the detail. There's an outline of a project plan, but which by the way, we haven't seen. It's not attached to this paper, but we need to see that. And the real question before us tonight is, use your words, division. Do we delay this or not? As per 3.4. So I'm going to ask the members to vote on this now. And the vote, I can just find my notes for the guidance of the exact words, to confirm the executive's decision. So I'm going to ask for a show of hands, please, to confirm, after we've heard this debate tonight, to confirm the executive's decision. Can I have a show of hands? Can I ask, not just physical hands, can you please raise your hands here?
I think, Chairman, you may wish to see that as a formal proposal and that be seconded if it was to.
Well, my notes say that's what we're here to do. It says OSMC is asked to review the executive decision and to resolve either to confirm the executive's decision or to produce amendment or propose amendments. So I'm going to confirm the executive decision.
So that would be a proposal.
You're saying I need a
confirm,
proposal for that.
And that be seconded. And because the alternative is that it be referred back to the executive.
Right,
so it's one or the other of those options.
Okay. I've got a couple of hands up. Councillor Cole, I saw you first. You're proposing that the executive decision is confirmed. Does that have a seconder? Thank you, Carl. Okay, it's done properly now. Thank you. Okay. Well, can I have? How do you wish to count this vote, Clerk? Just a show of hands. So all those in favour of that.
Chairman, can I point of information, please? Because
yes,
I'm a bit. I've never seen the chairman and propose something in this way and then seek it. I mean,
well, I haven't. I was going to, but I haven't.
You haven't.
I was pulled back.
So we have two options that were in front of us. We only seem to have gone for option one, which Councillor Cole jumped in and has put on the table. So. We have our lawyer here. What's the constitutional situation here? How should have this been handled?
Well, so I think it's been handled as it should be handled. There are two options for this commission when a matter has been called in. They are set out.
So when I actually asked about putting, I effectively said I'd like to put some amendments. Is that not a proposal to go for the second option then?
Well, it wasn't moved as a formal proposal, so it wasn't taken as that. So a proposal would need to be moved and seconded in the same way in a planning committee. Members would formally propose that an officer's recommendation will be accepted or rejected. That there are two alternatives here. A formal proposal has now been moved and seconded. That proposal now needs to be put to the vote. If it's carried, then that will be the end of the matter. If it is not carried, then an alternative proposal can be put forward.
Okay, so can I ask, please, as a proposal has been made, properly seconded, to confirm the executive decision. All those in favour, please show their hands. All those against. So that's the proposal is carried. Thank you. Right. Well, I don't think we've any other business. And given the fact that we haven't any other business, I'm just about to close the meeting. However, I'd just like to say, and especially as I'm not going to be available for our chief executive's farewell on Thursday, and this is the last time. This is probably your last real formal committee, Nick. And I'd like to say well done tonight, and it's been a pleasure. And if I can say personally, we always haven't seen eye to eye, but we've always agreed in the end of the day that what really matters is the values and the importance of the residents of West Berkshire. It's always been to the forefront of our debate. So it's been a pleasure, Nick. May I wish you every success in the future. Thank you. the first of many. So I'd like to close the meeting. Can you tell me when we're offline, please?